Today, we're diving deep into Doug Macgregor's take on Zelensky and the wider dynamics in the Ukraine conflict. It's a fascinating and provocative discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to unpack there. What really caught your attention first?
Well, one of the core points is about Trump's priorities being more focused on the Western Hemisphere than on Eastern Europe. Essentially,
Right.
McGregor argues Washington's been like too soft on not taking firm stands when it comes to defending Ukraine.
That's interesting because if you think about it, it challenges the usual narrative that Ukraine is the sole front line. What does he suggest instead?
He implies that Western leadership is too indecisive and that the US might even be signaling a shift to prioritizing security in its own backyard.
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost as if a strategic pivot is brewing.
Right. So instead of seeing Ukraine as the pivot of Western defense strategy, there's this notion of like a recalibration where European elites are seen as weak or even irrelevant.
Exactly, and that's one of the more controversial takes. He goes further by criticizing US and European elites, calling figures like Menendez, Johnson, and Graham basically buffoons for holding on to an unrealistic narrative.
It's a strong indictment. I wonder though, isn't that a bit too dismissive? I mean, to brush aside decades of diplomatic experience all at once?
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, it's like he's saying, look, these leaders are living in a bubble, and that bubble is dangerously detached from what the realities on the
Yeah,
ground
I
are.
see what you're saying.
Though part of me feels that this criticism might oversimplify the complexities of international diplomacy.
True, and sometimes such sweeping statements can gloss over the layered challenges in policymaking, don't you think?
Definitely. And speaking of layers, there's this whole security guarantees debate that McGregor touches on. He recounts how a Trump ally floated the idea of providing security guarantees to Ukraine, supposedly even getting Putin's nod in some form.
Yeah, that definitely raises more questions than answers. Right. And the ambiguity there, what he means by guarantees, is left murky. Boots on the ground, NATO like troop deployments, it's a can of worms.
Absolutely. It's almost as if he's saying, guarantee what exactly, for how long. Rubio even pressed for specifics. And that, in my opinion, highlights a desperate need for clarity in foreign policy.
Clarity is everything. So then, to push further, there's this historical analogy involving the Austrian State Treaty, isn't there? How does that connect?
Yes, exactly. McGregor draws a parallel with the Austrian model: neutrality, limited armed forces, and even having a Russian representative to oversee compliance. It's like saying maybe Ukraine could try a similar neutrality model, which famously would presumably satisfy Russia while preventing NATO expansion.
That's an intriguing, albeit risky analogy. Risky indeed, because applying a model from Cold War Europe to today's Ukraine seems a bit like fitting a square peg in a round hole.
That's a good point. I mean, it's like, a historical blueprint that might not really match today's realities. But there's also the argument that such a framework could force Ukraine to choose like neutrality over military alliances, which could ease tensions with Russia.
True, but it's controversial. Absolutely, and the whole idea of Russia having already claimed a decisive win is extremely potent in his narrative.
Right. He states that this is not just a loss for Ukraine, but a broader defeat for the West. He argues that the US and NATO provoked Russia into war, leading to a situation where, in his view, Russia is now just
Exactly,
seeking
it's
stability.
almost as if he's recalibrating the entire war narrative. And that brings us to Zelensky's role in all this. The suggestion is that no matter what, Zelensky can't be satisfied with compromises.
Yeah, that's key. McGregor portrays Zelensky and his backers almost like insatiable forces, always demanding, always pushing for a win in negotiations, even when Russia is apparently demonstrating some flexibility.
It paints a picture of an impasse. It's a tough dynamic because if one party never agrees to a compromise, then peace talks become impossible.
Exactly. And then there's the wild card, Trump's possible endgame. He hints that Trump may end up drastically shifting US policy by basically announcing, "We're done," and withdrawing military and financial aid from Ukraine.
Yeah, that's a bombshell move. That shift would be monumental. Imagine the entire balance in Eastern Europe flipping almost overnight.
Yeah, it's like almost surreal, suddenly saying goodbye to Russia as an enemy and letting Europe fend for itself.
Right? That's a very dramatic change. But to step back, does McGregor really think that's the best route? I mean, isn't that a bit dangerous for global stability?
Well, his argument is rooted in this belief that the West has struggled with decisive action for too long. He seems to suggest that by shifting, Trump would force European nations to confront their own role in the conflict.
I see that angle. Yet, I'd respectfully challenge that notion. Pulling out could very well destabilize the region even further, rather than prompting European resilience.
That's a valid critique. I mean, if the US withdraws and leaves Europe to manage on its own, it could lead to a power vacuum or, even worse, embolden aggressive moves from Russia.
Absolutely, that's a serious risk. So, in a way, Macgregor's argument forces us to ask, are we really better off risking potential disengagement for a chance at forcing tougher negotiations?
Exactly, it's almost like a high-stakes gamble, and while his perspective is intellectually stimulating, it does come with significant caveats. For instance, what happens to trust between our allies if such a radical pivot happens?
That's the million-dollar question. And, there's also the matter of how historical analogies might not perfectly map onto today's geopolitical complexities.
Yeah, it's like drawing a blueprint from the past to fix a modern machine. Sometimes the parts just don't fit together.
Yep, exactly. All these points compound into a broader debate on how best to handle an incredibly complicated international crisis.
Right on. And while some of Macgregor's points seem provocative deliberately, they do serve to challenge the prevailing consensus. It's like shaking the tree to see what falls out,
It definitely makes you think. One thing that stands out is the emphasis on setting a clear and decisive strategy. There's a real call for a no-nonsense approach rather than dithering over endless compromises.
Exactly. The narrative is, essentially, that if the pursuit of peace or resolution involves endless negotiations with an unyielding party, then maybe a more decisive, even if sharp, repositioning might be necessary.
That's a stark way to look at it. And it's that starkness which might be what appeals to certain audiences who are tired of bureaucratic back and forth.
Precisely. It's like he's appealing to those who crave a clear, decisive move rather than what they see as political grandstanding and paralysis.
It's a call for bold action. Yet, balancing that bold action with the risk of backlash or even further escalation is the million-dollar challenge.
Definitely. And this discussion really underscores that every move in international politics, especially in this conflict, has enormous, far-reaching consequences.
Absolutely, man. So, do you think there's any middle ground that avoids both extremes? A complete US withdrawal and an unyielding demand for endless concessions?
That's the million-dollar puzzle, isn't it? I mean, perhaps a recalibrated strategy that enforces firm commitments while still engaging in diplomacy could be the key. It's like a balancing act on a razor's edge between decisiveness and responsible
That
partnership.
sounds ideal, but super challenging to implement. Right. Implementing such a balanced approach would require not just rethinking strategy, but also gaining broad consensus among allies, which might be easier said than done.
No doubt about that. And while Macgregor's perspective might seem extreme to some, it ultimately forces us to face the uncomfortable questions. Are we playing it safe by dithering, or are we risking too much by making a radical
It's
shift?
a debate with no easy answers.